I've been out to sea in my mind since I was a kid. Songs rambling round my head, taking me across the world and back home again. Home in the stillness, I got curious about other people's creative practice and how they made a life in the arts. So I invited some of Australia's most interesting artists over to the shed for a conversation. All right, here we go. Things have changed a little bit, which has been a good scene. The big powerboats, but old Pablo, he's used to coming off the beach. He's an organic kind of character. Yeah, I've been looking forward to this catch up with Emma Donovan all week. She's one of those truly special people, so full of light. I'm excited to see where this conversation takes us. All right, Emma, welcome to the Fisherman's Shed. It's so wonderful to have you here with us today. What are your memories growing up in a musical family?
I have too many to choose from, I reckon. And I think this is the big question for me today is, I'm going back up on, all my memories. And I think that's where I kind of always start, maybe my songs or conversation.
Yeah.
It's easy for me to go down memory lane because I feel a little bit, spoiled when I think of my memories of my childhood.
Yes.
But my memories of growing up has got a lot to do with music, I guess.
Yes. With the family band.
With the family. It all links to either, family singing, family cooking, family fishing,
Yes. Yeah.
So there was a lot of things we did as a family, and that was it.
Yeah. And so you sort of sang with your mum and your auntie and your uncles, is that right?
Yeah. Mum was one of 6 and she was the only daughter.
Yes.
And so she was like, the big sis with 5 brothers.
Yep.
And so there was this family band that my nan and pop created. They sang, so it was like Nan and Poppy. And everybody knew them as Miko and Aileen Donovan.
Yes.
And they were like, the mid-north coast, everybody knew Nan and Pop.
Yeah.
Pop wrote lots of old music. They both came from 2 different missions too on the mid-north coast. So my grandmother grew up around... she was a Dungari woman and she grew up around Burnt Bridge Mission, which is in Kempsey on the mid-north coast. Yeah. And just as you come into the valley there, you got like Nambucca Valley, but coming into it is like Guy and Maxville. Yeah. And then you go a little bit further out and there's Barraville, and there's an old mission out there called Barramish. Right. And my grandfather come from out there. And so when they met, they both sang beautiful. Yeah, right. Like they're gorgeous singers. And then they have this family of 6. Right. Yeah. So everyone sang. And so everyone sang. And then he kind of cloned like his sons were like, that was the band, the ready-made band there. Yep. Out of 5 of them, 3 of them were kind of pretty solid musos. Right. Yep. And then here comes me, little spoilt first grandchild. Yes. I always tell everyone. Yeah. And I was, the older sister's daughter. Yeah. So some of them uncles, that's funny relationships for me. Right. Like I call them, sometimes I don't even say uncle, I'm like lad or bud or, and I'm like, the little niece, but like almost they were like my big brothers too. Yeah. The younger ones. Yeah. And so what were you singing? what sort of songs were you singing? Oh, a lot of old pop soul tunes. Yep. Like I said, like he wrote lots of songs. And we were kind of known Nan and Pop were known a lot in the community, Aboriginal community. Yeah. And so when there'd be like fundraisings for funeral, health or anything back in them day, they'd even like rely on my grandfather to host these kind of like, probably a bit bigger than this, like a hall style kind of vibes, where they'd, you'd pay coin donation to go be what would they say, the old do or the old barn dance and so my grandfather was like this community musical man who set up these spaces, you know, for all the kids to play and, you know, a lot of my memories go back to that because when I was little, I remember just being like a grumpy little kid and being around all the music and I'd sleep, you know, near my grandfather, near his piano or, you know, in some of the old, you know, corners of the halls or in guitar cases. It was pretty cool. But then growing up, I'd start singing then with my uncles and mum and then pop.
Is that where you think you found your voice? Is that where it was? Where you kind of...
That's where I know I did. I know I did. Like I even just, the biggest memories for me is learning harmonies and just being in like the kitchen or in the nan's bed. There'd always be uncles with guitars in the house. When my pop passed, I was young. I was about 9 and my nan had this thing where we'd have to go down and sing to his grave all the time. And so that was a big thing, you know, and to the point too where we'd sing so much in the community and the family all knew this, we'd get asked to sing at funerals, we'd get asked to sing at, you know, I'd tell a lot of people like, we're like these funeral singers, like when Mob passed, they know the Donovans will come and, you know, they just used to put on the pamphlet like Donovan family. And, you know, because there's so many of us who just go, you know, like go and sing and even, it's not even a big thing if I'm not there or other uncles aren't there, someone will be there, like.
It's a powerful thing it's a powerful thing to be able to contribute, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So this is a thing about the arts and music, and, you know, what it brings for people in lots of different times of your life, whether that's, you know, joy or whether that's in pain or sorrow or, you know.
A lot of it come from them joys of mostly Nan and Pop's voice, that they were singers and we were just proud that, you know, they were, you know, holding the family down with them being these, you know, powerful voices and then, but also that sorrow and I guess the main thing that I always, you know, look back and think is, you know, that they just brought us together, you know, pretty tight. And we still are.
So, you know, as a kid, and then you become a teenager and it starts moving on for you and you start to own it for yourself beyond that thing. Was there a moment where you thought, like, this is working, music's working and I could make a life out of this, or this is really what I want to do? Was there a moment when that happened? Was it in the Stiff Gins? Was it before that? Was it after? Like, when was the moment? Was it a particular gig that happened?
Well, I always had I always had like part-time bar work, cafe work. I never had any big jobs. Like I was still kind of, by the time I kind of joined bands, I was still kind of working out. I just left school. Like with Stiff Gins, I left school and I met them at like a music course, you know. And so I was like working out whether I wanted to even finish the course. And then I get a bit distracted, meeting two amazing musicians like them. And that's, kind of went into different places. But it was mostly for me, when I started Black Arm Band, I got the opportunity to have lots of work. And I had a part-time job at a community, community centre where I worked close with Aboriginal community of Western Sydney. And I was helping. My job there was a community coordinator to help, Aboriginal mob in that community. Facilitate workshops or musical things or just gatherings. And I always loved to be involved in community. And then I remember just feeling bad about asking for a lot of time away. Like I wasn't sure if I was ever going to come back to a job. And then and that was because I had that opportunity with the Black Arm Band mob. And,
so how long were you with the Black Arm Band for?
I kind of got asked to do the first production around the end of 2004. It was kind of all coming together. And
Stiff Gins had finished by that point? Had you finished up with the Stiff Gins?
Yeah, the Stiff Gins still continuing today.
Yes, but
I just left, big hairy 17-year-old me said, I'm out. I think I was ready to turn 18 or 19 when I left.
Yeah.
Left the Stiff Chins. I just wanted to have had my heart set on some other musical like outfits. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
That was
so the Black Arm Band that took you all over the world, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That's where it was. A big time for me to experience it was a nearly 30+ company.
Wow.
Where you'd have the artists, musicians.
Yeah.
And it was the first time I'd start learning about taking direction. There was an artistic director.
Okay.
And all the producers and the amount of time that I went away, that was like my other family then.
So what did you learn creatively through that time with the Black Arm Band? You obviously had a musical director, but what sort of things came for you through that time?
By the time we did the second production, I think the first thing I learned in the first production was a lot more about our history, Aboriginal music and where it kind of fitted in the whole of Australian landscape. That was the first thing, because as a young Aboriginal girl, it was not that clear to me. I knew blackfella music growing up through my dad and what he played, and hearing songs like Warumpi and Warumpi Band and Uncle Archie and that. But I think I was too young to understand where it fitted. Yeah. But I learnt very quickly in Black Arm Band, I was so proud what I was a part of, because I was like, this is, could be part of any band right now. Yeah. This is the one, you know, got Uncle Bart Willoughby there from No Fixed Address, and all these pioneers and all these people that were truth-telling our story. And that was, for me, it was the first time I actually sat there and went, okay, I learned all the lyrics to, From Little Things, Big Things Grow. Yeah. I didn't know that yarn. I didn't know about people from Waddy Creek. Right. I didn't know about Vincent Lingiari. I knew vaguely, but I didn't know the proper story. Right. And then Black Arm Band gave me them opportunities to sing about it outside of this country, but also go directly to that community, like Galkarinji, and sing for the mob that would have had mob from, included or related even to someone like Vincent Lingiari. That's when I was like, okay, this is pretty special. And I learned a lot about our mob. Yep.
What an experience. And did you collaborate with any of those artists sort of after that period of time?
Yeah. Well, like I said, this band became my family, and this is where I know the relationship of the Putbacks started with me. Okay. Because them two brothers now, Mickey Ma, the bassist, and the drummer, Rory McDougall, they were in the Black Arm Band. Right. And so in between a few tours, they'd be like, Emma, what do you do after these? Like, where do you go, And I'll be like, I've got some gigs, I've got other things lined up. And then Doogs, Rory McDougall, he said, we play in a band called the Putbacks. Would you come and hang with us, or come and sing and play with us? And I remember this one time I was in Melbs. I think I was living away, like up north somewhere. Mm-hmm. But I'd come back to the town, to Melbourne, and then I went and watched the Putback gig. And I was like, really? What? You want me to sing in, this band? And so that was them relationships then. Right. Started like...
So how long after that did it happen that you started? When did It's Dawn was the first record, right?
Yeah, so Dawn was... we were kind of like cooking up something around, probably end of 2014. Yeah. But we released Dawn by 2015.
Wow.
Yeah.
So it's, obviously it's a different experience from what you've been working on before, and then you're making the music with the Putbacks. How different was it for you in that sort of transition period of time musically?
I guess I always look at the collaboration with the Putbacks as another big learning. Like, same as I look at when I was with the Black Arm Band, there was so much for me to learn and find out about myself and about others. The second production for the Black Arm Band was Dirt Song, which meant we could contribute more to the writing of it.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and that's when I formed them relationships with Mickey Ma and Rory McDougall, because then we were kind of like, you know, we were lined up with other collaborators within Black Arm Band.
Ah, right. And was that where writing began for you personally, or were you writing before that?
No, I was writing before that with the Stiff Tunes. The first time I was writing came out of the family kind of country gospel outfit. Yep. And then me meeting Nadine Kalina for the first time in, you know, Stiff Tunes and at the Eora College was the first time I had to go writing. I think I always wrote stuff to myself, but it was the first time I had to go at sharing it and singing it with, you know, another band, other people,
Gotcha.
The Black Arm Band company kind of, you know, folded and finished up after about 15 years.
Right.
That went on.
Yeah.
Old fellas now. And then, and that's why I always laugh at Mickey Mal, like, we are getting on, bros. Like, because then when I started work with the Putbacks, it kind of just was coming to that end.
Yeah. So what are your memories of the Putback period of time that period of time in your life? Yeah.
I did freak out a bit. I mean, the first time, like I said, Rory was asking me, I remember the exact time he said, you know, you got to come, Ems, and, you know, and check our band out. Went and watched the band, and I was like, oh, send me more, you know, like send me some stuff, like you know, what you're doing. And, you know, had the old school now, little CD, you know, burnt CDs that we'd share with all the, you know, they'd send me like Putbacks, instrumental tracks that they were doing as a band. Yeah. You know, the Putbacks were together for a good 10 years before I come along.
Right, yeah.
They had a long relationship there too. Yeah. And, you know, some of the lineups had changed on the way, but when I formed, there was, you know, Mickey Ma, Rory McDougall, Justin Marshall, Simon Maven, and Tommy Martin.
Right.
Yeah, so they were the Putbacks. And then, so I'd ask them, actually it was Mick, he'd always send me some CDs, and I'd you know, that was a kind of a new sound for me. I never grew up listening to that style that they were into. Yeah. And to be honest, like I remember just going for the first time to a lot of rehearsals with them in Melbourne, and I'd never seen these vinyl collections, you know, for years. Like I'd get to the house and there'd be vinyl from here to the end of this, you know, and that was inspiring for me. Like, we made demos on some of the first tracks, like Dawn, like with leads running up, you know, this house where, you know, Mavo's, you know, was engineering this sound, and his bed was on top of his little kind of like working space, and all of them little things that led me to that. Like, I'd never been around, I'd never experienced. Like, I think that's what, I wasn't living in Melbourne, but then I moved to Melbourne. For the Putbacks, I was like, I'm coming here, and I'm writing. I'm gonna try this collab. There's something, because they'd send me. When I think of that collaboration, I think I learnt again a lot about, you know, myself and them styles. Like, you know, they were into bands like Booker T, Irma Thomas, I think, Anne Sexton, you know. There was a lot of, I remember the music that they shared with me, I didn't know, but I had a go at it. I had a go at, you know, bringing to the band my styles and my story, you know, and it was a little bit, at first was a little bit, I didn't know if it was wrong or right. I didn't know what it was, but I think by the time we finished that first album, I just went, this works. This is, I think I knew I had these, you know, these 5 amazing, most generous musicians. I thought, what have I done what have I done in my life to meet these fellas?
That's where collaboration is in that beautiful spot, isn't it? When you find people. But is it deep courage too, as an artist, to move through different stages of your career and actually be open to change? You know, the fact that you opened yourself up to that, something that you didn't quite understand, and that you sort of found your way into it. That's...
And I didn't know where my place was too. Like, I didn't know if I, you know, do I fit in here or do I... But very quickly, I took a big ownership on it, and I just went, I've got some you know, these guys have got my back, and I felt like the most safest place for me to sing about anything. That was the first time my writing, for me, was just, I knew I had all this support. Right. It was of all of them, all of these, you know, members of the Putbacks.
So what did writing look at that period of time, like you kind of working in the studio? What was writing like that for you? How did you do that? Were you writing lyrics on your own? Were you coming up with melodies? Was it in a collaborative type approach? How would you kind of go about your writing for those records?
It changed a lot over the times that we wrote more.
Yeah.
I think I always say it, the Putbacks have got, you know, they got ideas for days, these fellas. I was like, how am I going to keep up with these mob, you know? Like, and I wanted to always be prepared so good, like when we met or when we'd have work out time. Yeah. If these fellas were saying, Ems, we're going to go and have a rehearsal, I knew that they were going to work on new stuff, you know. Meanwhile, they've send me like, you know, stuff online, or I'd have access to these little vaults where they'd put ideas and stuff. Or they probably had like, you know, years worth of stuff, you know, before I kind of even met them. Yeah. You know, backed up in these little vaults, and I'd go in there and feel like I, you know, got someone's diary, you know, going in there and looking around at music, and I just would find stuff that I could like relate to. Yeah. And it got me into that habit of, I personally, like right back from even before the Stiff Tunes, I wrote to myself, but I was just a little bit keeping it to myself. Like, not shame, but just like, I don't know if I want to share that yet. Yes. Like, there'll be a place sometimes, you know, so I kept a lot more. Yes. Right up to that point of the Putbacks, I kept writing, and similar kind of thing, but I'm like, this is the space. If I can share it anywhere, it's here. Right. Here, right now. So I did that. And then because of the way they worked and how, you know, they were quick, and they kind of almost made me feel like, not saying that they weren't precious, but they, I don't know, the way these fellas made ideas and things, it almost was like, you know, not precious, not careless or anything, but just easy. And so
they weren't holding on hard.
They weren't holding on hard.
Right. Yes.
Yeah. And so there was still a little space for me to come in and go. Right. Sometimes, you know, I'd keep it really separate. Like I'd write separate. Yes. You know, and I'd go off hearing these ideas. Right. And I'd prepare myself. I'd like, when we'd have rehearsal, I'll get in there and I'd make sure I have something solid to. Right. So you would listen. You'd listen to some of these ideas, musical ideas, and then you'd find one that would respond to, and then you'd write a bunch of lyrics and think of melodies and that kind of thing, and then enter back into the space saying, "Hey guys." Yeah. So that when we had like a proper run together, I'd have something to work with. So that tended to happen as a full band together in the room, or did you do that with just a couple of the guys? The first album, so Dawn, I had a lot of lyrics. Dawn was, I'd come from a really heavy time in my life when I did meet the Putbacks, and so Dawn, I just wrote I remember just having all these lyrics. Yeah. And I kind of had an idea that I was going to go to the Putbacks. But I was very close with Mickey Ma. Right. And so me and him kind of like made, you know, little skeletons and little shapes before we kind of went to the full Putbacks. Because I still, at that time, I didn't know most of the guys. Right. I only really strongly knew Mick and Rory. Yeah. So, but, you know, before we knew it, you know, by the time we did Crossover and Under These Streets, it was a whole mishmash. And even to the point where I was sharing my own idea. Yeah. Like, I was sharing my own, you know, for a song like Mortar by a Tree, which ended up, you know, a bit later down the track. You know, that was something that where I would, I'd be confident to say, here's a melody or here's an idea, and I'd put it in that vault and say, can we work on this or can you work around? Can we do something together? It's
like, super vulnerable, isn't it? To start to work through collaboration. That's a very vulnerable place, and it's really vulnerable when you first go, like, here's my idea. What do you think, guys? You know?
It was awesome having all of them. I just felt like, it was very, like I always use the word generous when it comes to the Putbacks. They had this big open heart, you know, and they were like, here, Ems, you know, sprinkle some, you know, sugar on this, you know, what,
That's awesome.
Come, you know, do what you want to do with it, or you know, vocally, where do you want to take it? Yeah, and I did. Yeah.
And you certainly did. You certainly took it to a beautiful place, you know.
Yeah.
You know, that's so good. That period of time, is there, like, what are the, not even just then, but across your career, what are sort of some memorable, what are memorable shows or experiences that you've had? Because we've had these, you know, you've had this long, rich career. And like, when you think back about it, like, are there particular shows or experiences of touring? Because, you know, it's like we're down here together and we've had a great time. There are different moments across your life and your career that you respond or you think back about. Are there particular shows or things that you think about?
I think for me, the biggest, you know, the biggest experiences that I just know changed my life was, you know, with the Black Arm Band, we'd go to places like, you know, London, or we'd go and play in these massive concert halls, you know, Sydney Opera House, you know, concert hall. But then we'd go to Menangrida, you know, little basketball court out there, you know, Popanya. And like I said, you know, in my learning of songs like, you know, From Little Things, Big Things Grow, learning about that song and that community and them, that people and that mob, we'd go there after the songs where all these songs were from and took place, or, you know, it was inspired by it, we were there. And I think I'll never, I'll always be humbled by that. Always be humbled and very grateful for that. No, I'm getting upset. Because there were some people there too, like Uncle Arch, Nanny Rib, who passed now, George Roddenbull, you know, Yongo, you know, Yongo Bradawanga Man, like these songs, like Island Home. We went to Popanya and we seen where the Warumpi Band was named after a hill in Popanya. We seen the Warumpi Hill. You know, and it's so iconic to a song like Island Home. And then on top of that, I would learn how to sing in Yongomata Island Home, which is the direct language to that song. And we do these versions of, that was the time of my life. I just, I haven't, see, you're talking about memories and I'm thinking about all these times. And I think that why I'm getting upset is, there was some amazing people that were attached to that that aren't here anymore. And what a time to be a part of it, you know?
And it's the power of art and music and culture together and experiences, and, you know, all those things together. I mean, that's such, for me, being an artist and musician, it's the experiences of doing that with other people and meeting people and travelling to places and experiencing things, which is so rich, right?
And I was only talking about it the other day. I've been on this last tour with young brother James Gilligan. He was a part of the Black Arm Band. We were talking about it the other day. He would have been like in his 20s. And white fella, you know, and the experience that he had with us black fellas in that time, we're talking about it, we'll recap and going, do you remember this, do you remember that, do you remember? It didn't even matter, like the relationship that happened in that band. It didn't matter who was black, who was white. It was a band, it told a story. Everyone was there to support that story and we went and did it. Like that was that was one big experience. I loved it.
That's awesome.
Very grateful.
I'd love to hear about the last song you wrote.
The last song I've written? I wrote one, what's today? It's today, Monday.
Today's Monday.
So I went over to Jess's. I had day off in Melbourne last Thursday and I just asked Jess if she could help. So Jessica Hitchcock. She's been singing a lot with Paul Kelly and been doing stuff with Kate Miller-Heike. Become one of my, you know, little young sister girls. And I'm like, come on, Jess, you're a little genius. Help me out with, you know, because I heard her say a week ago that she just loves country and I couldn't believe it. And I love country music. I was like, I heard that you love country. Like, do you want to write some stuff with me? She's like, yeah, come around. I had some lyrics, actually, like I said, write all the time. Got some stuff I need to always get out. It's kind of my little go-to place, little, you know, notepad and pen. and I always write stuff. But the last song I wrote was with Jess, and it was kind of like a bit of closure for myself, because I've just recently moved to Western Australia. I lost my mum about 6 years ago, and I feel like in these last 6 years I've just been. I don't know how many leases I broke, I don't know how many states I lived in and houses. I just didn't know where I wanted to, rest my feet. And I feel like I've found it.
Yeah.
And it's longer away from here as possible. It's like we're down in Bibbulmun country, which is my dad's mother's country.
Right.
And I live in Bunbury with my dad.
Yeah.
And it was this whole song is about that closure, but also double checking in on Mum spiritually, that she knows we're right there, because my mother's country is northern New South Wales.
Right.
I've been around her, and she's resting now in South Coast. So that was always a thing for me. Just I didn't want to go too far from her. And I'm a long way now. Yeah. But I still feel like I'm home. Yeah. So I wrote a song about that.
That's awesome. Yeah. That's cool. What a great...
all the things in my crazy life.
What a great... I mean, it's the thing about songs, where they come from and how it happens.
Place, timing.
How important is place to you in your writing? Like where you are when you're writing? Does that impact you a lot?
Yeah. I think because, when I go back to my upbringing, when I go back to how I was brought up, there were so many grandkids, and there was I grew up in these houses. There was 2 Nenas houses. So there was my mum's mum and then my mum's sister. Because all our Nenas, all our mums, sisters are like our mums. All our Nens, sisters are like our Nenas. So we always have one. Yeah. If one goes, we're going to have heaps more, Yes. So Nen's sister, both of them houses fed like all these, any grandkid that would walk into that house or any child that walked in the house. So I grew up like that. So when I think of place, I think the older I get now, the more I know I need to make that place and space. I don't have my mother around, I don't have my nana around.
Right.
Music for me is about place, where my kids are gonna have that similar place and styles of growing up the way I did. I want to give them that.
Yeah, you were talking about that earlier, about how you're often having dinner with your parent, with your dad, and it's just really integral. Like it's.
If I don't have a feed with Nan and Mum and Dad, I'm like, and even the girls, they know now. Yeah. If I say Nan and Papa aren't coming tonight, I've got to explain to a 5-year-old, they're not coming tonight. It's all right. We'll see them tomorrow. Yes. Like they are just part of we are part of their house, and
no one goes hungry. It's such a rich way to grow up as a kid, to be around your family like that,
Yeah.
Man, I wish I had had that. That's pretty...
I panicked for a bit in Melbourne because I was like, where's my family? I panicked in Sydney. That's why I'm there now.
Yeah. How do you balance, all the aspects like a creative life with your broader life,
Have you got enough time to talk?
I think it's fascinating for artists for us to kind of understand it, because for all of us, we're all navigating that,
Yeah.
And I think it's important for us to talk about it, because we can say, this is how I manage it, and this is what I do. These are the little things that I do, Is that a big part of why you went back home, do you think?
Yes. Yep. Yeah. Yep, definitely. And I love that, you do want to share this,
Yes.
This yarn, because it's important, especially because, for anybody that has a family, and children. I think, like I said, all them values, a lot of my musical values come from my family. Yeah. And me, what I learnt so young, growing up and being given to me. So I think when you're in spaces like the Black Arm Band, where you got companies, or you're playing, with bands like the Putbacks, and you're at these certain festivals and that, even the first time that you kind of, starting out, you get so worried about, I used to panic, all the time about how am I going to have kids? I don't even think I had kids like as young as I would have loved to have kids way younger, you know, but I remember just holding off all this stuff. How am I going to ever make that work? Yeah. Because there's so much to,
for sure.
to make sure that, happens. I think now I spend less time worrying about that, and more time worrying about how to be a good mum, how to be an amazing, parent to my children, to be that family person that I want to be, the daughter, the for the future, the old nana that, will have her home one day for my grandkids. If I focus more on that, hopefully the rest is going to fall into place. However that happens, I'll exhaust every way possible to, but I'm less worried about that now.
As an artist, I always feel like, because I had a similar thing where my wife and I held off having kids for a long time because we were so busy doing things. Now I've had my son. I just I should have done this so much earlier.
Time.
That's
like my mum.
doing?
When she first held my daughter, had my daughter at 36. And my mum said, "Why didn't you do this? What, look at her. Why didn't you do this, Emma?" And we had a big argument. I used to argue with mum. I'm like, "You was the one telling me, how are you ever..." Because she'd say to me, "Emma, how are you gonna..." She'd even say, "How are you gonna meet anyone? How are you gonna... How are you gonna have babies or meet someone to have a family with? You won't do that. You choose..." Because she knew what I was like with music. I was crazy for music. I always wanted to, do my thing. And I was like, and then so, let's get something clear. You told me, and so we worked that out. At the time that my daughter's 5 hours old.
Letting you know how it is. The thing with parents, right? Dear. So good. So I wanted to kind of come to your practice as a writer and all that sort of stuff. Where do you begin your writing process? Where does that happen for you?
I think I always just mentally make note of things every day of what I want to write about later. And it's always at night. It's usually, sometimes it's an early morning thing. I'll just wake up and I'll have some things to say when before I'm ready to move about. But usually actually writing things out from my head to is a process that happens probably, sometimes I don't have time or I'm just too tired. If I'm putting two girls to sleep, they usually put me to sleep, so I'm like, boom. But on a good night when I've got, I always, it's kind of my little routine. I just, and I don't think too much about, I never think too much about what it is actually going to be like in a song, even if anything makes sense. I just write, okay.
So is it a poetic form? Is it just ideas?
No, just ideas.
Just ideas. Just
things I want to say. Things I just want to say to myself. I'm inspired a lot by how people yarn and talk. I'm always like big ears. I'll listen in. I love it. I love how people just yarn and talk, and some of the things people say. Something will just stick out to me. Like if I've walked up the street today and heard someone say something.
I've heard Paul Kelly use the term. I think it's Paul Kelly talking about being a magpie, and just when someone says something, you pick up that as an idea and you write it in your journal. I used to carry. I was such a little, around Black Armband. And actually, this whole idea came from Uncle Shaney Howard. Is that right?
Because in Black Armband, he'd have a little notepad, and I'd watch him. I'd be like, "Yeah, Unc, what are you doing?" And he'd tell me he'd be, use that. And I did for a little bit there. Got little. Carried my own notepad, but I don't go that far now. I just make a mental note, and later I'll
put it in the book. And so then when you're revisiting song ideas, you roll through those things. You have a process where you kind of go back and you drift through and you grab lines, or how do you do it? There's stuff
there now. It's a lot. There's stuff there that I don't know when I'm going to use or if I want to add to it, and I just leave stuff. I feel like too, with this creative, with part of my process is, there'll be something that will stir me. One, I might be angry, I might be hurt. A lot of my stuff is usually out of me reacting to something, me reacting, and I can't sleep for a reason, or I'm, and it's I have to I have to write something.
Yeah.
It's just immediately, it's like I know that I have to put something down.
Yeah.
And to that point, I separate a lot of the lyric from melodies or, you know, but sometimes from real wild or real, you know, I'll sing stuff. Yeah, but it takes me a lot.
Do you ever use your
to
phone or anything like that to kind of capture your melody ideas?
Yeah, my little. I don't have a studio or anything things, but I use my phone and I use my memo notes.
I do the same thing. You find yourself. I'm sure I look like a crazy person. I'll be walking around the street singing some melody to myself to try and capture it in the mix.
Yeah. A lot of the demos for the last album I did. You know, if it's late and I can, you know, I remember I was even camping there with mum and dad. I was living with them for a bit before I moved into my own place, and they can hear me being real quiet, you know. And I was like, Mick, we've got to change. Like, I know when I'd send the demos back to Mick, you know,
you're giving him the note.
Yeah, not that key. Like later we'll work on the key, you know. But just for now, it's an idea.
Yeah.
Even on the plane too, I notice I write on the plane heaps. Like if I'm traveling.
Yeah.
If I go anywhere where I don't need to drive anything, a car or anything, and I'm sitting back, all right.
It's the stillness. I know when I had a kid, you know, that you have like little windows. Whenever you have a little moment, you just grab it where you can. You know.
I know that now that I've had the girls too. I think I make that more my routine because I'm so much, like I said, I'm so much about the girls that I that's my time out. That's my little time out.
Yeah.
To go and write. Yeah. It's like my little.
So you take those ideas, all those melody or lyric ideas, and then you meet up with Mick. Is that how you tend to do it, flesh it out, or
with this last album? Like before with the Putbacks, I'd go to the Putbacks. I'd be like, be ready for the, you know, I'd find some tunes that I'd make a note of, and I'd yell out to them, hey, this demo here, blue, you know, blue something. Let's work on that next rehearsal, and then I'd have them lyrics ready, you know. Yeah. And but now with this last album, I was actually really proud of this last album because it's the first time I got offered, you know, all the times, you know, that I've worked close to a label, I got offered a solo, you know, and I'm like, what do I do? What do I do on my own? What do I do without the Putbacks, you know? Yeah. But like I said, it's been like nearly 9 to 10 years with the Putbacks. So I was like, this was the challenge, this was the thing.
Well, that's
how am I gonna, musically, where am I gonna start?
Yeah.
So then where do I start?
And where did you start, Emma?
I went back down these memory lane to what I know, what I knew, what I think I know as a kid, you know, this country outfit. I always tell everyone, I'm lucky to know my initials, you know, on the uke or guitar. And so I thought, I just got to start with playing with that first. Yeah. And anything I can't kind of, you know, finish, you know, musically, I'll go to brother there now. Someone that knows me, someone that, you know, knows all of these outfits in my life. Yeah.
But it's a big stepping point to move outside of the comfort of a band arrangement, something that you've done for a long period of time, to then step into your own thing. You know, it's huge to do that.
You find all these sweet spots, you get comfortable, you know. It's always going to be different when you're up with someone, you know, new. Yeah. It's having the guts to do it.
Right, but that's the thing, isn't it? It's like it being comfortable in uncomfortable places, right? Yeah. You know, actually going, you know, this is okay. I've been in this spot before. I felt uncomfortable, and now something will come from this, you know, or having the courage or hope or faith that something's going to come out of it. You know, like what has been this whole transition period for you into this solo work? I mean, that first single that I've heard off the record, I know it's coming in next week.
It's coming next week.
Yeah. Which by the time this comes out, that album will be out. But that first song is so amazing. Yeah. It's beautiful.
I'm still like, I remember just sharing some of the ideas, and I'm like, Mick, please be honest. Is it cheese or is it cheese? No. What is it? Is it, you know? No way. He's like, Emma, what's wrong? Like, don't do this, you know? It's because I suppose like in an outfit like Black Armband, where I said like I worked with that artistic director. He'd throw me into this, you know, musical. He'd throw me into these songs, and I'd be like, what are you doing? I can't do this. He's like, no, you're gonna do it, Ems. I believe in you. You can do it. And I was uncomfortable, and I'd try it. and then I'll be all right.
So it's kind of, you've like, been through this before, you know what that feels like.
Yeah.
So how did it work? So you're writing predominantly on your own or with Mick? Is that what happened?
I had to go at some of them, some of the tunes on my uke, but I couldn't finish them without Mick. Yeah. He's unreal. I always kind of, even some of the feels and stuff, they, you know, I did this daggy thing. I'm so even embarrassed to talk about it, but just getting some beats and stuff on, you know, like GarageBand and stuff. Just some bass things, you know. Totally. And I just had to go at like trying to find some feels and, you know, because I'm not good. I suppose I'm not good when it comes to chords and stuff like that. But I can write a decent melody, you know, and have ideas. But I just wasn't confident that they were strong enough. And so that's where I relied a lot on Mick. I was like, I need your help, you know. And then the other thing too was the kind of feels, you know. I'm like, I want to do it like this, but it needs to be more country. And then bless him, you're like, he'd make these other random like versions of it, and he'd say, "Pick what are you thinking, Ems?" So we're doing all this. I just moved to Bunbury, and he was here in Melbourne, and so we did that bit of back and forth. But I couldn't finish some of these tunes without him, but at the same time, there's a big intuition there, I reckon, of what you've just done, because I think that's something that I learned, because when you play, say if you play the guitar and you're writing, you tend to fall into like the same sort of patterns of writing because you're using certain structures and stuff like that. And one of the things that I've mucked around with a bit is just putting on what you're doing, which is basically a drum beat through GarageBand or something like that, something primitive. And Sarah Blasco said the same thing. Just putting on a beat and then just singing over the top of it. And if you can get something that's really compelling from a vocal and a lyric and a beat, everything else can be filled in around that. But like that central core, you know, if you can really make that sing, that's where the power is. I do this little thing too when I'm driving, because there's something always about driving and listening to music, So sometimes I'll just drive, put that little recorded memo thing and just sing. Like even if the words don't make sense, nothing. Like I'll find lyrics later, you know. But just to sing how I want to sing. Like let it out without any
Well, so many artists do that, Emma. You know, they do that sort of get into that gibberish place, you know, and you're soaking up and then some words fall out and then you hold on to them, you know. I like that. I can, you know, I always make sure I do that. That's awesome. That's so good. How do you find moving through blocks? Do you have block periods where you feel that you don't, you know, have you had that period of time? How do you find your way through that for yourself? I guess I just leave it. When things aren't working, I leave it. No stress. I'm getting better at dealing with it like that, you know. Before I'd panic and what can you do about it, you know? So let it come when it arrives.
Let it come and go and have some, you know, don't think too much about it.
It's often when you leave something anyway and you're wandering off and you're making a cup of tea or you go for a walk around the block, that's where it all comes back to anyway, right?
I do sometimes might have a little, you know, but I don't take it on too much. I think sometimes when I usually have a lot to say, I reckon. I'm always ticking and I always want to say something, you know. I love a good yarn and I always want to, put down something. But I think, and when I don't, I know that, you know, I just need a rest from it. That's awesome. It is what it is.
That's so good. Emma, you're a really beautiful storyteller. Who impacted you the most on that, in your ability to do that? You know, I mean, the way that you introduce your songs and through your songwriting itself. Was there someone that deeply impacted you on that?
I think storytelling has been a natural thing, you know, in our family, community way. There's always that yarn about, I was talking about it the other night, even mob that don't know story, but they've heard story, never been there or witnessed a certain thing or something that happened, they got a good way of still telling it. Like, they got a good way of like still sharing that story. I love the way our mob tells story. We can't yarn or tell story without even getting up, we say action, you know, like they got to get up and do the whole action, make this story like the biggest yarn, you know, set the scene, everything. You know, singing, I think that's a natural thing that I've always kind of loved to do, I guess. And my uncles, my mum's brothers now, they got yarns and stories for days. Like that's just something, we always grew up listening to the way Mob tell stories. More recently, since I've written music, one artist has like, you know, I've always been interested, I think taken more note at the way he tells stories, at the way he tells his perspectives. And I hold on to that because of how it makes me feel, and I can see the way people have, the way he's kind of captured people, and that's Uncle Archie Roach. And I just, I've witnessed so many ways that he's told story, and it just, it's everything for me. I was, you know, around him a lot. He's one of the biggest storytellers.
Absolutely.
You know, in this space, this industry where we are, you know, I think there's some very special people that I could, you know, look up to and learn from. It has been Uncle Arch.
I mean, both the way he would introduce songs. And the songs themselves, you know.
It's always interested me too. You know, it's something that I do take note of, and even right down to his lyrics and the way he wants to explain, bring somebody in, connect with them. There's something powerful and beautiful in it, and I've learned a lot from him.
And that feels, as you're moving into your solo record, does that feel like that's, as you've become older as a writer, more mature, that you're trying to lean in on more of that in this last period of time, and the way you've got the space to, I guess, to do that from the stage a bit more for yourself?
There's a lot of feelings and a lot of emotions right now for me as I do step into that. And I think of someone like Uncle Archie, where he was never, when Auntie Ruby was around, he was never a person I directly spoke or had a relationship with. After, it was always Auntie Ruby that held and kept me close on tour. Uncle Archie would be in the background and doing something, you know, and yarn, and you keep your distance. And when Auntie Ruby passed, I felt like that was my, you know, I still wanted to give him his amazing space that he always deserved, but he, you know, I'd be weary of that. But later on, you know, musically, we just sang and we were close, and I was so drawn to him. But what I think is, me taking note. That was, I think, when I think as myself as a songwriter, and how you know, and how I want to tell my stories, and you know, in being inclusive of not just writing songs for my mob and my people, but for anyone, you know. I'm inspired by that, and how he included everyone. You know, he was so generous and so thoughtful, you know, about that. And that I think that's what I was also going to say. Stepping into this space now, you know, doing things on my own, not having people, you know, beside me, or musically like these, you know, 5 other arms or people that I'm standing beside. I'm on my own, you know. And I've got band members. I've got Mickey Ma there, but you know, my story, this solo story is my story. And it is. It's a, you know, it's owning all of that. Now.
And how does it feel for you to be in that place? Does that feel?
It's you know, like I always go back to like my family, and I go back to my mum, and you know, these big matriarchal women in my life that raised me and my brother. And I think of, you know, these people aren't around me anymore. These, you know, I'm growing, and I'm, you know, I've to the point where there's comments from my uncles and my cousins like, "Come on, that's your turn now." And I take that very, you know, I don't take that light. Because I'm one of the oldest, you know, daughters too, for my mum. And I've got little brothers, and I've got other nieces and nephews. So it's all playing a big role in it all, I guess. And it's new, it's a new feeling, and it's a little bit scary, but it's something I know I have to do. Yeah.
It's the next step.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah. And people were talking about the show you did the other night, just how powerful it was, and how, you know, you were up front commanding things, the stories.
Yeah.
People were, you know, were so moved by that performance. So you're obviously, I mean, it's years of performance that's leading into this next chapter for you.
Yeah, and I hope, you know, I was also talking about like the musical part of it all too. I feel like, if anything, still seek that approval and that, you know, from my people, like my uncles. I want that, you know, coming from these different kind of band outfits, musical outfits too. Yeah. Not saying that my mob didn't approve or didn't, you know, enjoy it, or it was different. It was different for them, especially a band like the Putbacks.
Sure.
They've never heard that style. It was like, what are you doing? You know, what's this all about? Yeah. You know, be like that. When you go to sing at community, it was always different going to a community gig with the Putbacks, then going somewhere like Brunswick, you know, music festival, you know, very different vibe. And then, so now I guess as an older niece and an older woman now, I'm looking for that approval. That's all that I want, you know, from my family, from the uncles. You know, Mum's not here. There's Nan and Pop aren't here. There's younger cousins. They know all about Nan and Pop and their legacy and what, you know, Nan and Pop done for us. So it's sharing all of that for them, and I'm a big part of that. I know I am. So there's a lot of things I have to do. Yeah. Without having a big sook, without crying about it and falling apart.
What's the thing about being an artist across a full arcing career, you know, that there's different stages and different things that come at the different points, and then as we're moving into a different point, you know, you still have so much to say and so many important things, you know, to communicate. You know, it's music and art is not for just for 18-year-olds, you know, it's richer and deeper as it goes. You know.
I think the biggest thing for me at the moment is just seeing the response of my younger nieces and nephews. They like, you know, they scare me. Any young teenage kid scares me, you know, and so when I hear my brother say, "Oh, your nephew," you know, I played him a few tracks the other day off the new, you know, because I'm sharing these new tunes. Yeah. I'm like, what did he think? He goes, he loves them, sis. He loves them. But it's like we're whispering it, you know, we just...
How powerful is that though?
It's just such a relief. Yeah. Because then I've got my little ones that are younger too, you know, and I've got to leave, you know, this is their music, this is their mum's music, you know.
Speaking of which,
they'll tell you how it is, eh?
I don't like that, Dad. I don't like that, Mum.
They're gonna. I think it was Linda Bull or one of the Bull sisters. Like, wait till they're this age. Like, you know, they'll be so over you. Like, they'll be not even worried.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Because, you know, you started your music career, I guess, when we, like me, we were, you know, doing our CDs, and that was part of what it is. And, you know, we're sort of now returning to vinyl and then navigating what does a release look like? So like now, what is a release like? And all these other jobs we have to do, like social media, all those kind of things. Yeah. How do you feel about that sort of period? About navigating the new way in which, you know, we release and communicate?
Yeah. Get somebody else that knows how to do it. I'm hopeless at all that stuff. Yeah, pretty much, because, you know, it's like, I don't know, I just don't want that to get in the way of, you know, I love music, I love family and all the things. I always just think whatever it is I do and however I put things out, I've just got to always be true and go back to the way that I know, like get closest to the way that I know how to, you know, navigate, you know, that I would, you know, through my family or, if I just focus on that and if I just focus on the reason why I just love singing, then, you know, nothing else should, nothing else that I put out or get involved in should, get in the way or make that weird. So.
Wise words there.
Yeah.
What advice would you give your younger self?
Yeah.
Or an emerging artist that was coming up? What would you say to them?
I was so stubborn as a young person. We say mugu in Gumbanga. Mob say, this kid, she's that mugu. I mean, like, she's so stubborn, she don't listen, you know.
Yeah.
And I think I was one of them kids. So advice, I never took anyone's advice, didn't I? I think that my overall advice would be, don't, don't, I reckon. Don't, how I got to start off with, don't limit yourself. Yeah, don't put yourself into one little pigeonhole or in the corner there. If you want to do country, go do country. If you want to sing with Sister Girl, go sing with Sister Girl. You want to sing in a choir, go sing in a choir.
Yeah.
Don't limit yourself to one band outfit. Be in as many as you can.
Yeah.
And don't be, that's how you're going to learn. You're going to learn more about yourself if you go and collaborate with other people. And don't be afraid to do it. Don't be afraid to. For ages, so many friends would say, go write with them. Don't. Now, I just ring up friends. You want to write something?
Yeah.
Can I come over? Do you want to do something?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The courage to kind of
courage to do it.
Yeah. That's it. Emma, it's been so fun hanging out with you the last few days.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thanks
much
for having me.
Oh, it's been beautiful.
Thank you for having me in this space.
We've had a great time.
I
Thank you so much.
it.
Cheers.
Thank you.
All right, awesome.
Ta. Yay. Oh, Mark, I'll give you a big hug. Thank you. Thanks for